This is the first data science incubator following the retrospective last week. So I wanted to start by thanking everyone for sharing your opinions and feedback, and in particular to CJ for leading that. That was excellent. You know, I got really good ideas, and many of them have been, have already kind of taken action. And if you want to see, what's going on following that, this link here, or issue 18 at the Data Science Incubator summarizes, the lessons learned from all data science incubators up to today, and we'll try to make them better. But the session of today is focused on project-oriented workflow. And the reason why I kind of last minute decided to talk about this is because I realized actually that I had kind of neglected to talk about this topic explicitly in one of these data science incubators workshops. And many of you already incorporate the practices that we are going to be discussing today. So I apologize if it's kind of boring because you already know it all. But even if you already incorporate these practices, it may be the case that it is not very clear why you are or we are doing things the way we are doing. So I found very nicely articulated arguments about why these practices are a good idea. So instead of kind of trying my best and failing to explain why, I basically follow this blog by Jenny Bryan, who is our idol, where she explains, she focuses on these two functions and set working directory and remove, and explains why she believes that that's not a good idea, and what problems those functions might be suggesting in terms of what is the workflow of the person using those functions. So yeah, this what you see on the screen says that it's kind of aggressive in a way, but in a funny way, because Jenny is a very nice person. She would never go into your office and set your computer on fire, but she confesses that after seeing code that has to be tweaked manually before it runs a lot, when she's, for example, teaching classes and things like that, she does want to go and set computers on fire, but she doesn't do it. And same thing for remotely. So let's get started and start from the basics. Basically, trying to understand what is the difference between what is workflow and what is the product of your work. So she defines workflow as something that is your personal taste, something that is kind of embedded in your habits, and the product is the essence of your work. So what your project is trying to do. She articulates this idea that we shouldn't kind of hardwire our workflow into our product. So our scripts should leave no record of our kind of habits and taste in these matters. So I would like to ask you, everyone there, and this also follows the retrospective. So one of the things that we would like to improve is to kind of learn by doing. And if I create homework to be done after this session, I feel that I can be maybe kind of putting too much time pressure on you. So I would like to try. Let's try see if we can work on this together during the session. So here are 4 items that I would like to kind of stop for a moment and think if you believe that they belong to what we define as the workflow, so your preferences and taste, or if it is the product of your work. So anyone brave enough to say, for example, item number 1, the editor that you choose to write your R code, do you think that's your personal preference, your taste, or is that something that should be embedded in your scripts? Hello, hello.
We were answering on mute, and the general consensus here was workflow.
Good, great, okay. Of course, that's workflow. That was an easy one. Good to get started. How about the raw data? like a call to where, you know, the raw data is, should that be part of your script, or is that your personal preference? Is that product or workflow? Product, great. How about the name of your home directory? If that appears on your script, are you embedding workflow into your script, or is just the product of your work?
Workflow.
That's workflow, right? And that's where we actually wanted to get to, and we're going to be talking a bit more about that and how to get rid of that home directory from your scripts. How about the R code that someone needs to run on the raw data to get your results, including explicit calls to library to load all the necessary packages?
On 3?
Product, right?
Yeah,
we're doing
I have one question though with the raw data.
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily say in all cases this belongs to the product, no? It's just like a sample of the raw data belongs to the product, but not necessarily the entire raw data. I just highlight this because in our case we have proprietary data, and having it part of the product comes with a problem.
Right. Yeah. I think no, the raw data, if it's raw, is kind of, I think that, you know, you're highlighting a good point, that deserves clarification. If it's raw data, it's raw is because it hasn't been even touched, so it's not yet a product. But I think that in this definition, the product refers mostly to if it should be part of your script, because the script is kind of the product of your work. So basically, it is trying to get to the point where, I mean, if you are going to say, if you need the path to where the data lives, well, you know, I think that we agree that, you know, if you're, you know, bringing the data from somewhere, the path should be there. And if it's private, as you said, maybe you just need to, you know, write a comment saying where you got it from, and maybe clarify that it is private data.
Yeah. I just want to clarify that, not like,
Yeah.
I think this also comes from like a reproducibility perspective, which Jenny and a lot of these people are very heavy-handed on. So they might argue that if you can't provide your raw data because it's private or something like that, then maybe your script should work from some intermediary subset of that you are willing to use, so that it is reproducible, or at least reproducible like within organizations.
in our case, we just provide anonymized sample.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but I just
so you might consider that the raw data.
Yeah, so it's the raw data. I just want to make sure that everybody in the team, because at some point someone might work on a package without someone who knows this. We shouldn't necessarily put the raw data.
Good point. Yeah, privacy is a big issue. And also, and now that you bring this conversation, I also remember a conversation I had with Constanze that made me think that, you know, sometimes you want the script to output something just to kind of not break the code, so that the code actually runs. And so maybe one thing you could do is probably, you know, inject dummy data. So a data set that is fake, it's public because you invented it, you created it. And the only purpose, as long as you clarify that it's dummy data, the only purpose of it is just to demonstrate how the code works, so that someone can just, you know, copy paste the code and run. Okay, so let's, and this is something that even when we now know maybe what we should be doing, unfortunately, we still have a lot of legacy code that has you know, lines that, you know, we may want to refactor into something better. The approach is not, you know, to go back to every single line in our, you know, code with 1 million lines and change everything. A better idea would be to, well, every time you go to a script, see if you can improve something, at least one line. And eventually, if you go often to that script, eventually you will have improved in full. And every project from now on, ideally, should incorporate the practices that we agree are a good idea. So for example, here we have 3 chunks of code. The first chunk has this problem that we mentioned before, right? Where the variable home contains the path to my computer, see users, malware documents. And that's workflow, really. So if someone reproducing my work doesn't need that, doesn't need to see it. And I may have like embarrassing names there as well for the directories that I chose to put in my computer. So, so the first chunk is certainly something that if we have the chance to, we should refactor. So something better would be the second chunk, where we just, the only thing that we need to kind of confess is everything that is inside my project. So the path, actually inside my project. So this path is confusing because it says path to project, but it should say something like path to file inside project. Sorry for my error there. But then the path from my root, right? The path, everything that is like C, users, malware, blah, 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 that's not explicitly encoded, right? I'm just using a function from the FS, which stands for file system package, to create that for me. So if I'm working on a Mac, on a Windows, on a Unix, on a Ubuntu computer, it doesn't really matter. That will always work. So you can use that to refactor the first chunk. And even better, we would, ideally you would even avoid the slashes because not all platforms work in the same way. So the second thing is good. The third thing is better, where we encoded nothing that refers to my workflow. Any question about that?
I have a question.
Yes.
So I'm immediately thinking to GitHub and the fact that everyone has that in a different location. So if I wanted to use this command, is there like some flexibility in that regard of being able to always find, say, a GitHub folder in the computer?
Yes. Yes. Okay. So what you are doing, so inside the brackets, all this is doing is finding what is your home. So this thing that I'm highlighting, it is the package that is figuring it out. And what's here, as you can see in this example, is actually invalid. So it's kind of up to you to type within the brackets something that actually points to where you want the users to be. The problem of that we have in relying so much on the Dropbox folder is something like really tricky. And we are trying to help people overcome that by doing something very similar to this. We have a function that is called, I think it's called 2DII Dropbox, which simply wraps this thing and will add not only this part, so in your case, we'll say Vincent, blah, 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 but also we'll add everything that follows, to kind of drop you inside the Dropbox folder. So that way you can only concentrate on every path inside the Dropbox folder. Is that clear?
Yeah, but I see the problem is not everyone does that. Like I don't have my GitHub in Dropbox. I mean, this is another conversation for another time, but I was just wondering, yeah. So.
Right. In any case, I think what we are actually, probably the next example we show that, well, not the next, but soon. If we are working with a project-oriented workflow, where the project lives doesn't really matter because you only refer to things inside the project. And if we are struggling to get stuff into the project from outside the project, then we need to have like we need to support each other to try find ways to do it. I mean, the project should not depend on anything outside the project that you can, So let's continue and hopefully we'll get to that. So next section is exactly that, self-contained projects. So a self-contained project can be moved around on your computer or onto other computers. So if you change computers or your colleague wants to, place that project somewhere, they should be able to do that and it should just work, which means that every script in that project should refer to things inside the project in a relative way without referring to where that project lives. So nothing outside the project itself. You can refer to nested folders using just relative paths. And to bring data from outside, you can provide like a link to a website or something. And here is, the problem we do have, acknowledge that, is that we rely a lot on people having data in specific folders in Dropbox. So the way Jenny Bryan articulated, and I think it's a good way to put it, it's like agreeing that we will all drive on the left or the right-hand side of the road. So following conventions it does constrain our behavior a little, but that is going to make everyone's safer. So, and I know I do experience the friction. I know people experience the friction in the organization by trying to get data from those Dropbox folders. And I think that I want to be involved in that process to try to figure out how to reduce that friction. So maybe that could be a personal conversation with anyone, because we need to learn, how is that you face that friction so that we can learn how to remove it. So what do self-contained projects look like? Okay, it's a project folder that contains all relevant files. So this is in the ideal world. Of course, what we do is not the ideal world. We get data from outside the project. So that's how I need to be part of this to help change that. And any R script should be able to run from a fresh R process with the working directory set to the root of that project. Any R script should create everything that it needs, and that thing that it creates should live in its own workspace or the folder that contains the project, not outside. Any R script touches nothing that it didn't create. So for example, it doesn't install a package that the user doesn't have. And let's see some examples to put this in concrete. Would you like to ask some questions before I move to examples? Or make comments?
No, I think it's clear.
It's clear? Okay, let's see what all these things look like. So let's explore some violations of this idea of self-contained projects. So let's say I am in a project, and inside my project, I have a folder called datasets. No, sorry, I am in a project, there you go. I am in a project, and to access my data, to create a path to my data, I need to do ... which takes me out of my project, and then access a sibling folder that is called datasets, and then inside it, there is my data. So this is the simplest scenario to represent what we are doing when we are calling data from our Dropbox folder. Anyone has an idea where I should put this folder called datasets to make it a self-contained project?
In the project folder.
In the project folder. So how would this path change once I do move datasets inside my project?
That's remove the data
Just remove the dot and the slash.
and slash that. Sure.
Just one dot, right? Is that what you're saying?
Well, that's one option, but we were suggesting just removing both dots and the first slash.
Okay, so you could just say datasets my data. Perfect. Yeah, you could do that. Excellent. So that would be a way to refactor, once you move the datasets inside the project, and I understand that it's not feasible for us maybe because the dataset might be huge, or the dataset might live on Azure server or something, but if you can make the project self-contained, this is what it could look like. How about this one? Let me show you. This is the area where you should be paying attention to. Remember, a self-contained project creates everything it needs. If you are restoring the object R data that by default, unfortunately, R stores R data, and you have to actually come here and do something to ask R to stop doing that. So if you are storing R data and relying on the outputs of previous R processes, if you rely on those outputs for your current R process, then your project is not self-contained because the project is not creating everything it needs. It is relying on stuff that was stored in the previous session. So how do you think you should go to options and you see this panel here? How do you think you should change this to encourage yourself to create self-contained projects?
Untick and set instead of ask never.
Exactly. So you untick here, restore our data into the workspace at setup, untick that, it should be blank. And here, don't even ask me, just never, right? So you're not bothered. When you close your session, R will just close, and everything that you didn't explicitly write as a file, it will be gone. And that's a good thing, because once you force yourself to do that, you will start writing code in a more self-sustained way. How about this one? And I'm sorry here, Pranav, I'm going to probably hurt your feelings. I know that you like payload, because payload, what it does is it attaches the package, same as library, if the package exists in the user's system, and if the package does not exist, it installs the package. But following strictly beyond preferences, following strictly the definition by Jenny Bryan of what a self-contained project would look like, which kind of violation would this be? Maybe you forgot what they were. Let me go back.
Workflow. Correct, that's right.
So, yeah. So this violation is that in where you are changing something that you didn't create in the script itself. So I'm going to a party, I take wine, and then when I leave the party, I take not the leftover wine that I took, but I take a more expensive wine that someone else took to the party.
I'm really not coming to my party.
Yeah, so you're affecting the system. So maybe the person who is writing your code has a very particular configuration of their installation. Maybe some code relies on a specific version of a package, and when you install this package, maybe this package has some dependencies, and those dependencies break the code that the person who was kind of trying to write your code had. So it is considered rude to say, to put it in a straightforward way. And now going straightforwardly to the specific problems of the function set working directory. But before we do that, do we have any comment there or questions?
About set work directory?
No. Until the previous section.
Mauro, just one comment regarding the Pacman thing. So I understand, it modifies the environment, but when the payload that boosts or like installs the library, it makes sure that it's the latest one. So in a way, although it is breaking the rule, but it is also make sure that if there is like a team and everybody has like a different environment, that might be problematic. But with the Pacman, that issue can be solved. Like everything would be on the latest libraries would be installed. For example, would be like I recently came across is previously there was one complete command which fills up the rows which are empty. So previously they were using the inner join, now it is using the full outer join. So that breaks the code. So means with the Pacman, that would be issue, but I would suggest if you want to keep the libraries up to date, then this would be helpful to stay up to date with what the current library restrictions is available, the functions are available.
Yeah, I do the understanding, and actually at the end of this, no, actually in the beginning of this blog, Jenny says, well, all of this, the caveat is that as long as it works for you, it's good, and the only problem is when you kind of, as long as it works for you, it's great, and go on. And with this, I'm gonna say I do myself, and I've seen a lot of people doing things that because they really know what they're doing, it is safe for them to do it, but probably would be not the kind of thing that I would encourage a newcomer to do. So I know that in your hands, Pranav, this is a totally safe practice. But in the same way that I've heard, experience, the one of the two authors of the Pragmatic Programmer, he said, who is like a legend, he said that he has been experiencing writing no test for 6 months, and the impact on his code has been null. And he was brave enough to write that in the book, and the other author was kind of raving about that. So, and he said, well, what I have to say is that, if you have been writing code for 40 years, then maybe just give it a go and see how you go. But until you reach that point, probably you shouldn't try this. I kind of liked it because it's like, well, okay, of course, with experience, you really know what you're doing, and you decide in a very measured and controlled way what risks you are facing. So I'll leave it at that. And before also, I want to say that RStudio recently, I believe relatively recently, incorporated this feature where if you type library and the name of a package that you don't have installed, it will immediately pop up this thing telling you that you don't have the package installed. So if you want, you just click install, and it will install it for you. So it is, it kind of does something similar to pload, except that you have to kind of actively go and press a button, which I believe is a good design. Going back here.
Mauro?
Yes.
Well, I was going to try to stop that a bit short because we're running low on time. There are solutions to dealing with packages and specific version types of packages that we need to use. That's something I briefly touched on the presentation that I did about installing packages, but it's a rather large, confusing topic, so I almost avoided it for this format, but maybe at some point we need to address that.
Okay.
But it's definitely not something we can resolve in this, what time we have left here. So.
Yeah. Well, I think the one great thing of these sessions is to expose the issues. We won't be able to solve them, but at least expose them and make people aware of the problem. Yeah. So we're talking about set working directory. This is, Jenny Bryan's opinion on what's wrong with this. So this is what it could look like, for example, where you have, you set the working directory to a path that only Jenny has, and then you kind of rely on that working directory being there to do a bunch of things, so to write other paths. And then, for example, here she's also kind of showing this example where she's getting an image from outside her project directory. So what's wrong with this? A bunch of things. So I think we kind of already covered that, but basically the path won't work for anyone except the author, and maybe not even the author, because in a week or two or a month or a year, you will have changed your paths and things will break. The project is not self-contained or portable. To run, anyone except you will need to manually edit the paths, which is kind of a pain. And also suggests things that, like follow. It suggests that the user is using a long-running R process and switching gears from one project to the other by calling set working directory, as opposed to doing something like this. So here I have, 3 projects open. This one is, I restarted the session and the working directory is pointing to the project folder, to, in this case, RTI match. This other project restarted the session and automatically the working directory is pointing to the data science incubator project. And this third one, same thing. I restart the project and without doing anything, it's already pointing to R2AI analysis. So instead of relying on setting manually the working directory, you can just rely on RStudio projects, for example, or on the here package. So that is what Jenny suggests you should do instead. Either rely on RStudio projects, or you call the function here, which is very clever and identifies the root of a project by a bunch of things. For example, if there is a Git folder, or if there is a .rproj file, or if there is a .here file. So that is like a way to overcome the need of using set working directory. And this will just work for anyone you share the code with. And beautifully, it also works with R Markdown files that have a very weird notion of working directory. And while last, do you have any comments there?
Just fully agreement that our Markdown has some weird behavior with that.
Yeah, it's a default that you can change, but it's a painful default that goes against any other convention. So it's a pain in the butt. Remove list also has some problems, and this is her opinion about that. What wrong? Again, it suggests that the user is running a long running process instead of kind of restarting all the time and starting from a fresh session. It does not, in fact, remove a lot of things. I mean, it doesn't create a fresh R process. It will only delete objects that were created and are stored in the global environment, but it will not, for example, restart detach packages that were attached. Or it will not kind of reset options that were set, like set working directory if you do it globally, and it will not change the working directory. So it is it is not probably accomplishing what you think it might accomplish. So remove list is not the way to create a fresh process. And it is also hostile to anyone that you ask help, because if I am running my own project with very expensive objects to create, I have objects in my environment that took me an hour to run, and then you ask me for help, I run your code, and your code contains that line, it will remove objects in my global environment, and I will hate you. So it is rude as well to leave that in scripts that you're going to share. So what's better? Okay, you start from a blank slate, which is kind of the options that we saw before, and ticking that box, saying never store, never ask me if I need to store objects from previous sessions into the next one. Restart very often, and by very often I mean very often, maybe every 5 minutes. It's kind of a tick, you should be kind of doing it almost automatically. Shift Control F10 will do the trick for you. And rerun every script from the top. Every time you restart, then you rerun the script from the top. If you are running long-running processes, then what you do, well, what you can do is you can isolate the little bits that are expensive, that take a long time, and you can write explicitly an RDS file, and then you work on downstream from that data. You create scripts that continue the work by reading that data that you wrote in the previous script. Or if this is something that you do very often, maybe you should be learning a bit about Drake, which is a package that works exactly on that problem. It will cache long-running data sets and make sure that you are not rerunning things that shouldn't be updated. So okay, this is the end. I'm sorry that we went way too long. And this is what I wanted to end. I mean, the importance of these practices has a lot to do with whether your code will be run by other people or not, if it's going to run in other machines or not, and if you're planning to run this in the future or not. So if you're doing something for yourself, for that is ephemeral, and you're going to run for the next 10 minutes because you're trying something, maybe you shouldn't worry at all about what we have been discussing today. So if that work serves your purposes, then go ahead and be happy. With that, I end. Any questions or comments?
So we didn't decide. Is this? I thought at the end we're going to decide if this is a must-have or a nice-to-have.
Yes, exactly. Sorry, that's what the title was to remind me, and I forgot. So, what do you guys think based on what we discussed?
Hands for must-have?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Pretty much
100% But Dan still wants to do his own thing sometimes.
I think that is exaggerated.
No, it's good.
That's free flavor.
Okay, actually, I intentionally let the decision to the group because it was a safe, easy decision. But yeah, we kind of agreed with Klaus that it would be great to have the discussion live. But then if it's we're not decisive, someone has to make a decision, and probably the person who run that particular meetup should make a decision. But I think is that safe to say that we all agree that these practices are going to be helpful for everyone?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good.
Are you changing even all the code we have?
Is there
We gotta
change
No, Jackson's doing that, don't worry.
We gotta figure that out.
All right, we'll
We
let
gotta
Dana hang out
finish
about
up.
I think we
13
need
minutes
to,
ago.
Yeah. Again, I mean, my suggestion would be don't change stuff that is behind. Start implementing these practices from now onwards. And if you have to share any code that has these things, well, take a moment to kind of refactor them before you share it. So everything that you touch is like, the more you go through a code, the more you will need that code. So if every time you do just a little bit, improve it by a little bit, in the long run, what you need the most will be the most polished product.
Cool.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and sorry for the delay.
Good day, all good, man.
All
Ciao.
right,
Ciao.
you in data hang us?
No.
I will not be doing it.
Yeah, I'm not.